So for those of you who've been watching my channel, you've seen I've been building the mega cabin, and this actually kind of goes with the mega cabin, and I am going to talk a little bit today about designing the mega cabin. So I actually designed the entire mega cabin myself. I designed the entire layout, the look, all of it. So this is something I kind of went through recently and definitely learned a lot of things along the way. So I thought I'd make a video and talk a little bit about, for those of you looking to design your own dream home or your own dream cabin, whatever it might be. So some of the steps we're gonna cover here, just to give you kind of a quick rundown of what's gonna be in this video. We're gonna talk a little bit about the plans for your dream home. We're gonna talk a little bit about how to make those plans, how to budget for those plans, some of the things you're gonna fight with the budget, some of the quality versus aesthetic things. We're gonna talk a little bit about hiring a general contractor and some of the things you can ask them and some of the input you can get from some of the different tradespeople that you might already know. So step number one is gonna be, it can be the most difficult, but if you follow a few of these guidelines, it's definitely gonna help, and that's gonna be your plans. So to do anything with the house, to get bids, to hire a general contractor, it's really gonna help to have the plans. So really the first thing you're gonna wanna do is, if you're just, kind of getting started and you're not even really sure what direction to go, I would definitely recommend looking for either your local tour of homes or even just houses for sale. Start touring houses, start looking at a lot of houses. You need to start gathering a lot of data, taking a lot of pictures. I would even, when you go tour these houses or to look at houses, I would even take a tape measure with and measure some of the rooms, measure the ceiling heights, measure, find the things that you like, and it's really gonna help if you know the dimensions. So if you want a big open concept, to kind of know if you go into one and you like the feel of it, you like the size of it, to know exactly how big is it, the room really is. Is it 40 feet wide? Is it 20 feet wide? That really is gonna make a big difference. So I would say start gathering data, start looking at a lot of houses, go online, you can look at houses there, and really you're gonna wanna get into some houses though and tour the space, feel the space, and see what you like and what you don't like. And that the only way you're really gonna be able to do that is see a lot of houses in person. So I would say get out there, tour some houses, take a tape measure, and really get a feel for what you want and what you definitely don't want. So when you start doing your plans, it's really gonna help you to have that kind of data behind it. So from there, once you kind of have a feel for what you want, what you don't want, I would start to draw the layout. So I would just get some grid paper, and I would get one of these here. So this is a scale ruler. So it's kind of a weird looking ruler here, and it's got different scales on it. So the nice thing with that is you can actually draw things to scale. There's lots of YouTube videos on how to use one, how to read one. But I would start kind of just drawing stuff by hand, drawing a layout, getting that floor plan put together. And from there, there's a couple different options. I would recommend a draftsman. That's what I use. Now you can go to an architect. If you're building a $1 million house, a really big house, and you really want the fancy details, that's gonna be an architect. It's gonna cost you a lot more. But if you go the route more that I'm talking, a draftsman would be really nice. They're not gonna be able to do all the things an architect can do, but they can do almost all of it. And especially if you draw it out ahead of time, get the layout you want ahead of time, get the ideas you want ahead of time, and basically then they're just putting it into their computer system and coming out with the blueprints. Another option here would be online plans. One thing you can do, it can be a little expensive actually, these online plans, but one thing you can do is buy those plans and then go to a draftsman and have them adjust those. It'll save you money on the draftsman because he should charge you less. He's only adjusting a plan that already exists. But that would be another route, would be to find an online plan you like. There are some sites where you don't have to pay for the plan. You can kind of preview it, and that can give you a good idea too of laying out your own plan, and that'd be another area to gather some data. So the next one, and this is the one that everybody's gonna struggle with, is the budget. So the budget, and this is what I dealt with on my mega cabin. What I'm really talking about with the budget would be, there's the quality versus the aesthetic, and then there's the overall budget that you're gonna fight the whole time. So really some of the things that come down to the decisions on some of this, I would start to ask yourself the question of why are you building the house and how long are you gonna stay there? It really does make a big difference on some of these decisions. You know, one of the things I would say is if you're gonna stay there forever, if this is your forever home, you're never leaving, there's definitely some quality things that are gonna be worth paying for. The first would be the windows. So on a place like the Mega Cabin, the windows were a big expense, but I plan on keeping the Mega Cabin for the rest of my life. And when you spend the money on the windows up front, it really is gonna pay off in the long run. If you start putting vinyl windows in and the cheap, you know, knockoff windows, it really is gonna be, you know, 10, sometimes even 10, 20 years down the road, now you're looking at replacing windows. Whereas if you buy the high quality windows right off the bat, you know, aluminum clad, expensive windows, they're gonna last. The next thing you're gonna have to start to fight on the quality versus aesthetic is really gonna be the exterior of the home. So we talked about the windows, but now the siding. I really like LP siding, but it can be double or triple of vinyl. And you get the quality and you get the long lasting, but you get the price tag that goes with it. The next thing be the roofing. You know, on my Mega Cabin, we're doing a metal roof. Now I actually prefer shingles because the cost is a lot lower and I think they look really nice on some of the more expensive shingles. But on the Mega Cabin, I don't have an attic. So it's a hot roof that we spray foam from the bottom. And that's where you're really gonna want a metal roof with some of the specialty stuff like that. So those are some of the things on the outside I would definitely look at. But when you start spending that money, if you have a set budget, it might start affecting some of the aesthetic things that you really want on the inside where you're gonna be living, the flooring, the countertop. Some of those things are gonna start to get affected if you have a hard limit on your whole budget. And that's gonna be really kind of the dance you're gonna have to do with the budget is, and it's what I've had to do with the Mega Cabin, you have to kind of balance out how high a quality do you want versus some of the aesthetic things that maybe you can live without. But that's where you really have to start getting numbers and getting an idea of what you can do and what you can't do. Now, along with that, on some of the quality parts, now on the inside of the house, you're gonna have other things that I would really like to do on my Mega Cabin that maybe I can't even do. You know, for mine, one of the things I kind of gave up was I wanted to do power blinds on that big tall window. And after seeing it framed up and everything, I don't think I would even close them. So only in the bedroom I'm gonna do the blinds. But you're gonna have to start making compromises, and that's just part of building and designing your dream home. Unless you have an unlimited budget, you're definitely gonna have to get used to making compromises. So another quality thing that you really need to think about when you're designing, you know, a house from scratch is the efficiency. Nowadays, there's a lot of options and a lot of things actually are starting to be required by the code. But one of the things I would recommend would be spray foam. Now, spray foam is expensive, it costs a lot of money, but it's one of the things that if you're gonna spend the money and get the efficiency, that would be where I would start. Before anything else with efficiency, if you want a more efficient home, I would definitely start with spray foam. And then from there, there's things like exterior foam, and that can be a little tricky with windows and with siding, but that's gonna help. And then along with that, some of the HVAC stuff. So that's where you're gonna have to start talking to some HVAC guys. And maybe once you hire the general contractor, that's where you start to make some of those decisions, because he's gonna have HVAC guys that he's gonna recommend. You're gonna talk with them. But some of those things start to add up when you have your initial budget and you've got all the aesthetic things that you want, and then you start getting into some of the more detailed stuff, and some of the more quality parts that are really mechanical or you don't see on a day-to-day basis. Some of those things, it's worth spending the money, but you also have to fight the aesthetic things that you really want on the house, and determine what's gonna work for your budget and what's not. The next thing is gonna be the details. So the details, in my opinion, I really like getting the details right before you start building. Now, I change my mind a lot, and the guys who frame for me will tell you that doesn't work for me, but I get a lot of the details, aside from some of the framing changes I make. I try to get a lot of those details decided ahead of time. It's really gonna save you a lot of headaches when you already have it figured out exactly how you wanna do things, how you want the layout to be. That's really gonna help you with the subcontractors, and it's really gonna give them a better idea. They're gonna give you a better bid because you have more detail in there. And the biggest thing is you're gonna have to, visualize some of it and try to get it worked out just the way you want it so that it's on the actual blueprints. So where you start making changes with markers and things, it can get confusing, it can get missed, and it can start costing more money because they're having to go change things if it got missed. So I would definitely try to work out the details, exactly where you want everything, and get it all onto the blueprints so that there's no questions, especially if you can't be on site every day when they're actually working on things because you have a job or whatever the case may be. Getting the details right in the print. So some of the details to think about when you're designing your house, one of the things I would start with is ceiling heights. Now the mega cabin's different because it's got an angled roof, but a lot of houses is gonna be traditional framed with flat ceilings. So that's where touring a lot of houses, you can start to think about ceiling height. I really like 9-foot ceilings for a whole house, and then try to step up the great room from there. But you need to get into the houses and get a feel for 12-foot ceilings are really nice, but if it's a smaller footprint, it might feel a little awkward and just feel like it's too tall. So you really got to start to get a feel for one of the things that really is a nice detail is to go a little higher on the ceilings. But again, it costs more. The framing costs more, the lumber costs a lot, and it's just one of those things you have to kind of decide from the beginning and try to fit that into your budget and work backwards from there. So that'd be one thing I'd look at right away is ceiling height. How high do you want the ceilings? Do you want changes in it? Can you build that into your trusses? And that would be one area you can really change the feel of the whole house is what are the ceiling heights. Another aspect of the design is thinking about what orientation you can do with your lot or where you're building the house. So my cabin faces east. So those big windows, it's gonna be kind of nice because if it was south facing in the summer, it would just be cooking in there. So the east facing is really nice. Now that's where you gotta kind of figure out and maybe spend some time out at the lot that you bought or where you wanna build and just experience some of the different times of day out there and see what orientation you want the house and if you can change it. Obviously being on a lake, I didn't really have a choice. I had to, look at the lake, but it worked out because it was east facing. If I had those big bay windows though, again, south facing would have probably not been the greatest for me. So another part of designing your dream house is gonna be the timeline. So you might think that a draftsman, it's gonna go super quick, but if they're a good draftsman like mine is, they're busy. And that's where upfront, if you can give them more detailed lists and you can give them a kind of a diagram of what you want, it's gonna get done faster. But that's one area where you need to give yourself enough time to get the design right, to get the blueprints right, to make your revisions, to make your changes. And it does take time. For the mega cabin, it took me about 2 months to get the design right. It took me a few more months to get all the permits. So that's where, designing your dream house, it does take time and you just need to be patient, but you want to get it right. And especially on the front end, if you can get it right now, it's gonna save you a lot of headaches on the back end. So another aspect of designing your dream home would be talking with the subcontractors. So I'm at a big advantage, designing my mega cabin because I general contract for a living, and I know tons and tons of tradesmen who can give me input. The question I always ask them is, if you were building your dream home, what would you do? So some of these things that I don't do in a typical spec build house, I did change on the mega cabin because when I asked the HVAC guy, what would he do in his dream home, he'll give you the answer and he's got the experience to kind of steer you on that. But the other thing you can ask them too is, the cost versus the benefit. Is it worth doing this? Is it worth doing that? And they can give you a really good input on that, especially if they've been at it a long time. They can kind of give you the input. But that'd be the question I'd ask them is, if they were building the house, if it was their dream house, what would they do? And try to pick up some tips from them. So the last part of designing your house, and really for a lot of you, it's gonna be the most important part, it is gonna be to find a general contractor. So one thing I would definitely make sure, when you're finding a general contractor to, work with you on your dream house, is he's gonna be able to help you with some of the design, but I would definitely ask to see some of the other houses he's built, ask to see kind of his portfolio and you can see if he's got the experience. You know, if I was hiring someone to build the mega cabin, I probably wouldn't want to hire someone who's never done, you know, a timber frame or a frame like that, because there are a lot of details that go into it, and there's a lot of things you got to think about ahead of time and work out. So I would ask a general contractor, you know, as you're trying to hire them to build your dream house, and maybe this is a different video, but I would start to ask them, you know, to see some of the stuff they've built, and then start to ask them for input. So even as you're going through that hiring process, give them the plans and sit down with them and start to ask for input. And you might be surprised some of the good tips that they're gonna have for you, because they build houses for a living, and they can kind of steer you in the right direction on that. So I hope this really helped you. If you're in the process of designing your own dream home, I'd really appreciate it if you put a comment down below if you had any questions, or if this helped. I'd love to hear about that, and I'd love to answer any questions that you had. Hopefully this kind of steers everybody in the right direction. Even if you're designing maybe a remodel or something like that, a lot of this can apply to that. So I really appreciate you joining me. If you liked the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. If you want to see more stuff like this, obviously it'd be great to have you as a subscriber. And thanks for joining me.